Have you been thinking about some upgrades to your home theater system and you're loving the performance of Marantz's flagship AV10 preamp processor and the corresponding AMP10, but you haven't pulled the trigger as yet, primarily because of the price? Well, today we've got a wonderful surprise for you. This is the brand new Marantz AV20, and there's a corresponding AMP20 that are going to come in price-wise substantially below the flagship AV10 and AMP10. Still built in their Shirakawa, Japan facility, still hand-tuned by Marantz's engineers. But is this right for you? Let's dig into the details and find out. Now, Marantz's flagship AV receiver, the Cinema 30, is a wonderful product. It sells for $4,500 as of this filming. That's about a third of the money of their flagship AV10 and AMP10. And so there's really kind of a gap there. Why we're so excited about this is it allows us to fill that gap, and all of a sudden you've got a lot of mix and match options too. What excites us so much is now we not only have Cinema 30 at $4,500, AV10 and corresponding AMP10 at $14K, and this one right in between the two, but you've got all kinds of mix and match options that are now open to you. So for example, you want to go a little bit better than what the Cinema 30 can do. You could use a Cinema 30 or even a Cinema 40 for that matter and go preamp out into the AMP20. And now you've got an upgrade in power and performance without nearly going all the way up to the two separate pieces at their premium level. Or go the other direction. Take the AV10 and pair it with an AMP20. Because you can strap the channels into mono, you've got all kinds of options now that are open to you if you want to do something that's better than the Cinema 30, but you just don't have the budget to go all the way to the top. And as system designers, that opens up all kinds of possibility for us to assemble the system that's right for you. What are the primary differences between the AMP20 and AV20 and AMP10, AV10? Well, first off, in terms of processing, this preamp processor supports up to 13.4 channels. The AV10 gives you two more at 15.4 channels. You might not necessarily need them. Same thing with the AMP20. It will support up to 12 channels of amplification at 200 watts into 8 ohms, 400 into 4 ohms. The big brother, the AMP10, supports up to 16 channels of amplification. So really the biggest difference is if you don't need all those channels, this might be right for you. So now that we're looking at the back part of the AMP20, let's take an example of what we mean with all this flexibility. Let's say, for example, that what you really want is a high-performance 9.4 channel system. Well, they've got this little switch on every channel, and it's called BTL mode. By the way, Marantz does a great job in the owner's manual of showing you exactly how you're going to do this. But now you can have, for let's say the left, center, right, the front channels, the most important ones in your surround system. You've got double the power into those three channels. So now you've got 400 watts into left, center, right, and you've still got 200 watts left over into the 6 remaining height and surround channels. By the way, it's the exact same thing on the AMP10. So that's where we start talking about the flexibility to really dial in the system that you need at your price point to accomplish what you want to accomplish. One other important detail, all 4 of the subwoofers can be independently calibrated. That's huge if you've got either a sort of an asymmetrical subwoofer placement in your system, or maybe you've got, let's say, 2 higher performance subs in the front, 2 a little bit more affordable in the back. Again, you can individually calibrate for all 4 subwoofers. Before we dig into the details of the AMP20, let's take a second to think about these 2 pieces are from Marantz. So think reliability and durability and very good customer service if we ever do have an issue. Not to mention that Marantz is one of the most long-standing developers of great sounding audio products in our industry. When we listened to these, they sounded really good, and we'll talk more about that in some detail in a bit. Marantz is a big company, and they're vertically integrated. So they're building a tremendous amount of the components that go into whether it's a very affordable entry-level receiver or, again, a premium AV10 or AMP10. This AV20 and AMP20 combination might easily have cost 20 or 30% more if it was manufactured by a much smaller company. Marantz can take advantage of their economies of scale. Let's start talking about the sound quality of the AMP20. One nice thing is in the output stages of these 12 amplifiers in one chassis, Marantz isn't using standard off-the-shelf ICs for the outputs. Instead, they're using discrete topology output stage products that they call HDAM, which is actually now several generations into their HDAM development. Those circuits are a little bit more linear, a little bit lower in distortion than you would get with standard off-the-shelf chips. It might not make a massive difference only on its own, but as a part of the other things they're doing within the amplifier, it contributes to the excellent sound quality. By the way, we didn't mention before that not only can you strap channels into mono, but if you've got, let's say, left and right speakers that are biampable, you can configure the channels that way. So you're driving the mid-tweets and the woofers separately, let's say, again, in your left, center, rights. Another cool thing that the Marantz engineers did to make this amplifier sound its best, if you look at a Cinema 30, it's got one toroidal power transformer that runs the entire receiver. You look inside the AMP20, there are 6 individual toroids, one for each pair of output stages. Remember, it's a 12-channel amp. And then there's a separate power transformer or toroid that runs the rest of the electronics inside the amp. What's the benefit of that? Each individual channel will have something going on with it, and it doesn't stress what's happening on the other channels. So this is a real advantage of having the physical room just to do this amplifier instead of some of the compromises that you have to make for a wonderful product like the Cinema 30. It definitely results in better sound quality. So AMP20 uses ICE edge modules in the output stage as opposed to Class AB amplifiers. That's actually a really good thing because the ICE edge modules are very efficient, very high quality. If Marantz tried to build a 12-channel amp, not a 2-channel, but a 12-channel amp, all with AB modules, this thing would be physically huge. It would take up a ton of room in your rack. But additionally, it would have the downside of it would run much hotter than how this amplifier runs. And heat is the enemy of electronics. It slowly cooks the electronic components over time, which is why sometimes an amp you've been using for 30 years still works and sounds good, but just doesn't sound like it did when it was new. Now, let's take a look at the AV20 back panel. So you can see the features back here. Looking at the back panel, you see that we've got both a dozen single-ended or RCA type connections and a dozen balanced connections. And since they gave us the balanced connections, we'd rather see you connect using those. It will be a little bit quieter, have a little bit blacker background, and there's about a 6 dB gain advantage when you use balanced connections. These binding posts have a nice, secure, solid feel to them, so Marantz did a great job there. Coming across the bottom here, you can actually defeat the 15-minute auto standby circuit if you want to. They have DC control for turning on and off the amplifier at the same time as the AV preamp, in other words, one button, both turn on and off. But this connection called amp control gives you the additional nice feature of the lighting on the front panel of both units will work together as you dim or increase the amount of light if you want to adjust it, to your room. They'll move in sync with each other. There's an IR flasher connection, so that if you are putting the electronics, let's say, in a closet or in another room entirely, you can still run an IR flasher and be able to use the remote control. Here's a remote control connection for connecting to the AV10. And there's also an RS-232 connection if you have a control system like a Control4 or a Crestron, something like that. And of course, a separate IEC socket so you can use an upgraded power cable if you wish. Of course, we'd love to set up a demo for you if you can visit us at our 3 stores in Timonium, Columbia, and Gaithersburg, Maryland. If you haven't so far, please like and subscribe. That helps us out a lot. Click that little bell icon so you're always notified of our upcoming content. Let's talk about what happened when we used the products. And yes, we really like the remote that Marantz has packed in the box. It makes using the products easy if you don't have a controlled system. We didn't have the prototype samples for a really long period of time, so we hooked up in 2-channel mode and took a listen with a pair of Sonus Faber Maximum Amateur speakers. And it sounded fabulous. The first song that we listened to was Chris Stapleton's Say Something. And there are these occasional but rhythmic, solid bass notes that just sounded fantastic, taut and clean and no overhang or anything like that at all. And those bass notes didn't interfere with voices or instruments or the persistent finger snaps and hand claps that are going through the tune. Everything was kind of lined up just the way we wanted it. Second song we listened to was the Eagles Hotel California, the live acoustic version. It sounded about as good as I've ever heard it. The guitars just had this big, chimey quality to them that was really very natural. And that was when I first started noticing that the image was really nice and kind of solid in front of you, stable. It had height and width and depth to it, and it was easy to place the instruments on the stage. Next, we listened to Georgie Porgy, which is from Toto's first album. And Mark actually was listening with me and mentioned right away, boy, these drums sound fantastic. Jeff Porcaro, of course, is a fantastic drummer. And as Mark expressed it, his snare drum sounds like a real snare drum. It doesn't sound like an imitation of a snare drum. And we noted, too, that that didn't interfere at all with David Hungate's bass playing. Sometimes bass and drums can kind of get lumped together in a mix when you're listening on a lesser involving system. No problems at all with differentiating the two. That it sounded just so clean. We listened to the Dire Straits cut, You and Your Friend, which I've used many, many times for demo. But this time I was so aware of the sound stage. The acoustic guitar parts were very clearly on the left, the electric guitar parts clearly on the right. Mark Knopfler's voice was center stage, just really perfectly blending with the rest of the music. And I think as many times as I've listened to that classic demo cut, it was the first time that the image seemed the way it did. Just really enjoyable to listen to, almost like the musicians were playing it right in front of you. Now let's dig into the AV20 preamp processor. But before we do, let's take a moment to talk about the industrial design of these pieces. We think Marantz has done a wonderful job with, let's face it, most electronic components are basically a black box, right? Or in the case of some of their receivers, a silver box. But they really did a whole lot of things with the look of these products that I totally appreciate. These very smoothly rounded corners, the way that they have concealed some of these lesser used controls that you're not always going to be playing with, like being able to dim the side lights, for example. Well, it's underneath with a separate menu. So set up once it's done, and this is set up the way you like it, you can just hide all that. And it looks so clean and classy this way. We love the side lights, and the fact that they're dimmable is terrific, so you can adjust it to your environment. The way they did this textured look on the sides and the way it reflects the side light, just really cool, and we appreciate how much effort Marantz has put into this. We'll also put a link to the video, by the way, where we dig into, with Michael Sprague of Massimo, the internal components of Model 10, the 2-channel products, because that'll give you even more of a look under the hood and what Marantz has been doing with the industrial design there. Now, let's take a look at the back panel. Taking a look at the back of the AV20, so obviously we have both balanced and unbalanced, front, center, surround back, and so forth, going to your power amplifier. We love that they included a phono stage, a moving magnet phono stage. A lot of people who've gone away from vinyl have since come back to it because it's fun playing vinyl. Your legacy digital inputs here. We have 7 each HDMI inputs and 3 HDMI outputs. All of them support 8K, which is wonderful. I don't know anybody that would use all those sources, but you might. The eArc, of course, seamlessly interacts with your TV display device so that your TV shows also sound wonderful. The processor can upscale native 1080p content or 4K content to 8K quality. That's wonderful. They had room actually for some legacy connections here, both composite and component inputs. The only reason they didn't do that, by the way, on AV10 is they didn't have the physical room because, again, that one's got 16 channels to it. This one has, 13. They've got bass management, the 4 independent sub-outs. It's just wonderful that those are individually calibrated, and we talked about that before. Again, especially if you've got different types of subwoofers or, again, just different distances from your seated listening position. There's a toroidal power transformer inside. It's a big one, and that's a low-level HDAM S3 design. Processing options. You got Dolby Atmos, DTS-X Pro, IMAX Enhanced, Oro 3D. This does have HDCP 2.3, which is the latest copyright protection standard. And of course, it is made in their Shirakawa Audio Works in Japan. The AV20 supports a broad range of the most current video technologies, including the dozen that we have listed here. Let's talk a little bit about DSP-based room correction, of which AV20 is loaded. Now, no room correction technology is actually perfect. That's a given. But it's also true that no room is acoustically perfect. And if there's one component that often gets overlooked in a system, it's oftentimes the room itself. Sometimes people will obsess about the difference between, well, this amplifier has 0.1% distortion less than that amplifier, which in most cases you would really never hear. But then they'll just kind of forget about, in a room that's not a very good room, especially if it's a one subwoofer system, by the way, because multiple subwoofers can really help, you might be getting 20 to 30 dB swings in the amount of output, bass energy, that you're getting at one seat versus another seat. And being able to somehow identify those issues and work to correct them is one of the single biggest upgrades that anybody can do to getting better sound when they're watching movies and enjoying concert videos and that kind of thing. So the fact that this is loaded with really good room correction technologies, we think is a big plus. Marantz AV20 has on board the full suite of Audyssey Multi-Q XT32. They do supply a microphone for you, although sometimes people opt to get a better microphone. Optional are all the Dirac technologies, such as Dirac Live and Dirac Bass Control. But you can also run Dirac ART, the ART standing for Active Room Treatment. It's their most recent and their most sophisticated room treatment. The bottom line is that in some rooms, these technologies can make a slight improvement. In other rooms, they can make a huge upgrade in just how clear your music and movies sound. At Gramophone, we thank you for watching this video. We love having you along for the ride because we're passionate about music and movies, and we know you are too. In the AV20 and AMP20, Marantz has created literally AV10 level performance for somebody that doesn't need all those channels. And in turn, they've given us all kinds of options now to mix and match to give you the theater that you want based on your needs in your room. For more information, go to gramophone.com to find out more about Marantz and all of our fine brands. And you can always shop Sky by Gramophone, where you get a secure checkout with fast and free shipping straight to your door. Thanks again for watching this video. We look forward to seeing you in the next one.